My name is Adam Olshansky. I'm a Salesforce technical architect at Google, also a member of the Salesforce MVP Hall of Fame, 18 certifications, including application and system architect, a bunch of Trailhead badges. I've had the pleasure of speaking at Dreamforce quite a few times and also various conferences around the world. I really love helping people specifically develop and write code on the Salesforce platform. I also enjoy architecting on the Salesforce platform and also now in the AI era, helping people learn with AI with Salesforce as well. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn afterward. Let me know what you thought. Let me know that you came. And glad you're all here today. So with that, let's get into it here. A few things I wanted to go over. I'm going to set the stage. What is well-architected? When we talk about creating a well-architected project, what do we mean by that? There are 3 pillars of this framework. And then we're going to go a little bit into each one, how to architect a trusted solution, easy solution, and an adaptable solution. That's going to give us 8 tips, and I promised you 10. So I have a few more bonus ones at the end to round us out. And then we're going to have the chance to architect together a little bit. And you'll have the chance to think like an architect, and we'll get our architect hats on and hopefully come up with some solutions together here. One last thing, you might see this Agentforce Astro show up. I know people like to take pictures of the slides. Once you see Agentforce Astro, that means there's no more bullets left on the slide. So if you are taking pictures and you don't see this character yet, know that there may be more content coming, so be advised of that. All right, so with that, let's get started. What is well-architected? It's actually a framework Salesforce has been developing for a while. They're actually revamping it right now. I think there's a session tomorrow morning. They're talking about what the future of the well-architected framework looks like. But for now, available at architect.salesforce.com. And it's basically Salesforce's answer to, how do I architect something on the Salesforce platform? What is Salesforce's recommendation for best practices and things like that? And it's all surrounded these 3 pillars. How do we make our solution trusted? How do we make it easy? And how do we make it adaptable? And under each of these pillars, we have some sub-pillars. And we're going to have one tip for each of these sub-pillars here. A ton of great content on architect.salesforce.com there, so I highly recommend checking that out. But for today, we're going to focus on some tips for these pillars. And the first pillar is trusted. So some tips on architecting a trusted solution. And of course, the question is, why is trust so important? Some of you may be familiar with GDPR, the law passed in Europe several years ago, general data privacy regulation, protection regulation. Basically, what it means is you have the right to own your own data. You are the owner of your own data. You have the right to be forgotten. You have the right to tell a company what they're allowed to do with your data. And if companies break this trust, there are major penalties. And so we have the fine in euros and also in US dollars. And some big companies on the list, right? We got Meta, we got Amazon, we got TikTok. I don't know who Goggle is necessarily, but some big companies on the list that have had to pay the price for violating user trust. So how do we make sure that our solution that we are building is going to be trusted? And for me, with Salesforce, my tip number 1 is it's all about security, right? Security first, what Salesforce calls being secure. And this is really security at every level, right? We were talking about organizational security, session security, data security. And these are going to be asking us questions like, OK, what kind of licenses do we need, right? Salesforce licenses, package licenses, Experience Cloud licenses, Slack licenses now. Who are our users, and what kind of access do they need? What kind of tools are they going to be using? And how do we need to provision them? And once we figure out what licenses they need, what does our security model look like, right? We need to be thinking about the user personas and their level of access needed, right? Principle of least privilege. What is the minimum amount of data somebody needs? And what things do they not need, both at the data and metadata level? And this is going to help us configure things like permission set groups, org-wide defaults, sharing rules. Hopefully, none of us here are still using a profile-first model. But there are various ways to set up our org based on what level of access people need. And at the end of the day, security bleeds into everything we do on the Salesforce platform, including with code, right? We need to be thinking about our API access, right? How are external systems connecting to Salesforce? How are we calling external systems? And then lastly, when we are setting up our code, with and without sharing, right? Should our code have access to run in system mode? Should it have access to run only as the current user, right? We need to be thinking about that when we're coding as well. Right, so in addition to security, when we're talking about a trusted solution, we need to make sure we're compliant, right? What I call knowing your limits. And this is asking questions like, where does your data live? And where are your users, right? We need to be worried about legal adherence. We need to worry about ethical standards. And we need to worry about accessibility, right? Do we have a data governance framework in place? Right? Where should our data live, and for how long? Can we archive it? Do we not need to have a performance hit for having millions and millions of rows in our Salesforce database that are 10 years old, maybe? As you're here at TDX, you may have heard a thing or two about AI. The AI era is here. Right? So what guardrails do we need to put up for AI? Some of you may have heard stories about AI giving refunds to people who didn't purchase anything, or giving refunds more than what the purchase price was. What should our AI guardrails be? What should our AI be allowed to do to help us? And what should it not be allowed to do to actually cause more problems than solutions? And then we need to make sure we're building for our audience as well. Right? These are going to be things like localization, translation, right? Again, where are our users? And date formats. Date formats are really important to me. If I think about, today is April 15th. So if I think about a week ago today, it was, April 8th. And if I'm looking at a date in my Salesforce work for April 8th, and I write down 4/8, I'm going to read it as April 8th. But my friend in the UK is potentially going to read it as August 4th. So we need to be making sure when we are displaying dates and other things that are interpreted in different ways, where our users are very important, and we're making sure our products are friendly for them so they can be trusted by everybody, not just the people that are around us. And then the last part of building a trusted solution, kind of like an anchor or a lighthouse in the distance, is it reliable? Right? How are we building trust with what we're building? Can users trust your solution? Is it available? Is it performant? Is it scalable? Right? And you should always be asking yourself the question of how can I make it faster? Right? Does our data need to be real time, or can it be near real time? Instead of making the user wait until my process finishes, can I maybe say, hey, it's looking good, and then send them on their way and send them an email when it finishes? Right? I think back to whenever I buy airline tickets. Right? I complete my purchase on the airline website, and then a few minutes later I get an email, hey, here's your ticket, here's your confirmation number. I don't have to wait 3 to 5 minutes while all that processing behind the scenes happens. Utilize asynchronous functionality where appropriate. But a lot of different ways we can implement asynchronous functionality on the website. One of my favorites is, it's not asynchronous, but another feature I really enjoy is platform cache. Right? If I have data that I need to query again and again and again, it doesn't change, instead of taking that performance hit to query it, can I save it to the cache and retrieve it instantaneously and just update it periodically? Right? Are there any large data volumes to consider? LDVs. Right? Bulkification, always important. Are we making sure that our tools can operate on more than one record at a time? We're assuming a large amount of data every time we're running a process. And then also, are we avoiding data skew? Right? Are we making sure that no one record is apparent to too many records? That's going to slow the system down. You might notice some of these things are in bold. These will be handy to keep in mind when we're architecting together later. And then do we have a set of standards in place? Right? Does the button in one part of the application work the same as a button in another part of the application? At the end of the day, as much as I love Salesforce, as much as you may or may not love Salesforce, your users don't care about Salesforce. They care about getting their job done as soon as possible. They don't want to have to worry about which app am I in, which screen works this way, which screen works that way. They just want everything to work so they can get their job done. So are you having some sort of consistent appearance and functionality across all of your apps in your Salesforce org? And are you utilizing standard objects where possible? Right? So again, Salesforce has an entire company built around making sure these standard objects work. When we can use them, we definitely should take advantage of them. All right, so we talked about architecting a trusted solution. How about architecting an easy solution? Now, if you're a fan of Apple products, Google products, one of my favorite websites is google.com. It's a plain white page and a search bar and a single button. Right? I know exactly what it does. I know exactly how to use it. Now, when you and I are building applications, far too often we end up building something that looks like this. Right? We've all built it. Nobody enjoys using it. Nobody enjoys looking at it. This is not easy. When we talk about architecting an easy solution, it's not easy to build, but it is easy to use. And obviously, the left side is a lot more easier to use than the right side. So how do we make sure we're not building that application on the right? Tip number 4, what Salesforce calls being intentional, I call building value. But making sure every piece of the puzzle we have fits in exactly where it's needed. We don't have too many pieces. We don't have few pieces. We have just the right amount. And so this is going to be asking ourselves questions like, did you plan ahead? Right? Do we have a strategy in place? Do we have some level of maintainability in place? Is it readable for people when they come? And do they not get overwhelmed by it immediately? Right? We should be prioritizing features by their business impact. And we should be providing a roadmap for when things are going to change and be added in the future. Right? Again, going back to, do we have a system of governance? Do we have a release strategy? When are things being released? Who is doing the releasing? Who is doing the testing of the things that are being released? Right? Is there a plan there so people can expect when things are going to get to production? And thinking about when we are planning out that strategy. Going back to, again, what can we use Salesforce out of the box versus what do we need to custom build versus what can we go to the App Exchange for, right? Having some sort of strategy. All three are correct in some cases, right? An architect's favorite phrase is it depends, and it does. But having a strategy in place for when we want to build, when we want to buy, when we want to go to the App Exchange is very important. The other big thing, I'm a developer, I'm an architect, I like building things, and then I like building the next thing. But we have to ask ourselves what happens after we launch something, right? Is there an ongoing support plan? Is there a team that's going to pick it up? And again, going back to consistency across your application, do we have any team style guides, right? Are there naming conventions that we're utilizing? Maybe all of our code is pseudo namespace in a certain way. Maybe our objects are pseudo namespace in a certain way, so we can keep track which objects go together, which apps go together, which tools go together. Are we utilizing any design patterns in our org, right? Again, making sure it feels seamless going from object to object, app to app. And then are there frameworks we have in place? Do we have a trigger framework? Do we have a testing framework? Again, something that's repeatable that we can utilize. And then, of course, everyone's favorite topic, have we documented all of this, right? If somebody wants to go look up, OK, how does this application work, right? Maybe you built it 6 months ago and don't remember. Maybe another teammate built it. But having some sort of documentation where people know where it is very important for making sure that people understand the value that you are building. All right. Tip number 5 on architecting an easy solution. Salesforce calls it being automated. For me, it's automation is your friend, right? Robots can be friendly, too. Very important at Google, as you might imagine, reminding users why Salesforce is better than a spreadsheet, right? There's efficiency. There's data integrity issues. I had somebody telling me that to figure out what data changed in their spreadsheet, people were going into the version history and trying to compare to see when something changed, right? So automate what you can, right? Are there manual steps that we can get rid of for people? Are there alerts we can pop up, right? Are there validations that we can send when something's wrong? Kind of walk the users through it. And sure, yeah, we're in the AI era. Let's utilize AI where it's appropriate, right? But we also want to make sure we're following best practices here, right? Again, going back to bulkification, are we able to automatically operate on multiple records at once? Do we have a way to handle errors, right? When a user encounters an error, is it handled gracefully? Do we have a way to alert somebody about that? And again, validation rules, kind of helping the user along to make sure that they know what they need to be doing and what they're doing wrong so they can fix it instead of reporting a bug to you. And then again, as always, you're making sure we're using the right tool for the job, right? Sometimes that tool is flows. Sometimes that tool is Apex. Sometimes that tool is asynchronous processing. But no matter what it is, we want to have a system in place where we know that we can automate things in a manner that's going to help us and help the users use our product better, and we don't end up with that application on the right that I showed before. All right, my last tip for making your architecting an easy solution is what Salesforce calls engaging, what I call making it enjoyable, right? Think about maybe a fun dinner with some friends or some coworkers. But ultimately, your users shouldn't hate using your solution, right? It should be streamlined and helpful, right? I don't think users are ever going to love the technology the way that people that are building it love the technology. But the goal of the technology isn't to use the technology. It's to make somebody's job better and faster. So we need to keep that in mind as well. So again, how can we restrict the UI? Wherever we possibly can. Every little bit helps, right? Making sure we're only showing the relevant apps, the relevant tabs, the relevant fields, maybe doing a periodic audit. People aren't using this field. People aren't using this tab. Can we hide it? Can we deprecate it? Can we make it that much simpler to that screen on the left from the screen on the right? Are we able to reduce clutter wherever possible, no matter what it is on the screen? Dynamic fields and Lightning Web Components can help us out here. Maybe we do need a user to fill out 20 fields. But instead of showing them 20 fields at once, maybe we show them 5 fields at once in a screen flow. And then we move on to the next screen. It's another 5. Or maybe they update 1 field and 3 more fields appear, right? Have some sort of guided system so it's not overwhelming. Hey, you need to fill out 20 fields right now, right? Are we able to minimize data entry wherever we can, right? Maybe there's some values we can pre-fill. Maybe we can pre-fill them behind the scenes even, right? And again, guiding users along the journey, right? Maybe we have some progress bars so they know where they are in that user journey. Maybe we have some in-app guidance. We're pointing them, hey, you need to go here, and then you need to go here on the screen. And then again, screen flows can be very helpful with that as well, right? So making sure we are making it somewhat enjoyable, or at least at a very bare minimum, making sure users don't hate whatever tool you're building for them. All right, So now I'm going to talk a little bit about architecting an adaptable solution, the last pillar of the well-architected framework. And again, we've all been in situations like this where something comes up and we go, you know what? I'll just put some tape on it for now, and then we'll fix it later. Right? This is a temporary solution, right? And we know, the only thing more permanent is something that you say is temporary. So how do we prevent situations like this and actually make our tools adaptable for the long term? Right? I like to think about a castle, right? What Salesforce calls resilient. For me, it's building to last, right? Is our application going to last? Ensuring your solutions can handle change. Do you have some application lifecycle management? Do you have an incident response strategy? Do you have some continuity planning if things are going wrong, right? Is there a DevOps process in place, right? Maybe you're using DevOps Center. Maybe you're using an App Exchange package. Maybe you're using a custom DevOps solution, right? But we want to make sure we have some sort of release management. Again, we touched on this a little bit before, making sure we know, OK, when are things going to production? Who is sending it to production? What is our strategy for deciding when something goes to production? Are we building in a sandbox instead of building directly in production, right? Do we have some level of version control, right? Can we roll back if we need to? Can we see the logical progression of when things have changed? And then, of course, test, test, test. Now, I know Salesforce will tell you you need 75% coverage for Apex to deploy to production. But I would challenge that. I would think not about code coverage, and I would think about user journey coverage. Have I tested all of my user journeys? Because in theory, if you have, you don't need to worry about how much code you've covered, because your user journeys should test all of it. And if they're not, consider either that you may have missed a user journey, or maybe you don't need some of that code. If you walk through all the possible paths a user could take and code is still not being tested, do you actually need that code, right? And in theory, you should have a lot higher code percentage. Make sure you're testing flows and Lightning Web Components with the same strategy as well, even though Salesforce does not require the same level of code coverage. Right. And then do you have some sort of monitor and alerting strategy, right? As much as we all may love it, system.debug is sadly not an effective logging strategy, right? What can we do to make sure that when things go wrong, we can reproduce that? We can see the trajectory of what happened, right? Maybe you have a custom log object. Maybe you have an application that handles logging for you, right? And then do we have a mitigation strategy? When things do go wrong, are we able to handle it? Are we able to move forward? And then, of course, when it comes to data, backup and restore, right? Do we have a way to back up our data? Do we have a way to restore the data, right? People make mistakes. Things go wrong with data all the time. And that's OK if we have a way to restore to a good state. Right, and the other tip here for architecting an adaptable solution is what Salesforce calls being composable. I call being able to break it down, kind of like Legos, right? We can build a couple different pieces, and then we can combine them all together, right? But do we have some sort of building blocks that allow for modification, separation of concerns, interoperability, packageability? Can we package things up? Can we make things work together nicely? Maybe we do this by organizing into units based on business needs, right? Maybe we have one set of objects over here, one set of objects over there, based on the app and the tool that we need to build, right? So we can split our apps. We can split our code into modules. We can use things like pseudo namespaces, where we put the same word in front of every object or the same Apex class, right? But we want to be thinking about who is using the different tools so we make it consistent, at least within the tool, if not the entire Salesforce org. We also want to make sure our building blocks fit together, though, right? We want to make sure we have a nice Lego house and not a bunch of different Lego pieces that don't fit together. So again, we establish some team standards, right? Are we able to reuse key utility functions? So again, different parts of our application are functioning relatively the same way. I also challenge you to be aware of dependencies, right? Ultimately, a lot of the dependencies are impractical to fully eliminate, especially if we want things to work together. But they can be mitigated by making sure that breaking something in one part of the application is not going to break the entire system. Or if we do have a dependency, it's thoroughly tested, and every time we make changes to something that touches it, we run all the tests on that piece of the application, right? We can also consider when do we need data versus metadata, right? If users are updating something constantly or wanting some metadata to be updated constantly, but we move that into data and put the onus on them to make the updates instead, right? The other thing we utilize quite a bit on our team is virtual and abstract classes. So we have a bunch of different flows for a custom object with different record types. They all work relatively the same way, but with small tweaks. So we have a common utility class that they all inherit from, and then each subclass inherits it and has some custom tweaks based on what they need for that specific record type. All right, so that was 8 tips. I promised you 10, so I have a few extra. And my tips are mostly focused on making sure we're not building a bridge to nowhere, right? We might have the best of intentions, but we need to make sure our actions are backing that up. So my tip number 9 is getting users on board, right? What you may refer to as soft skills, right? Keep in mind that people don't like change. I don't like change. I don't know how many people here love change, but most people do not. So how do we get our users on board with what we are building, what we are changing for them, right? Keeping in mind that they probably aren't going to be thrilled about it. Constantly be thinking from a user's perspective. What's in it for me? What are you doing for them? What value are you bringing to them, right? And make sure that the users know that you're on their side. You're building this for them to make their job better, to make their job faster, right? You're delivering the tool for them. If you can, make them the co-owners. Make them feel like they are engaged in this build process, right? Include them while you're building it, right? Make sure they establish a partial sense of ownership and a partial sense of adoption when it rolls out, right? At the end of the day, when we roll this out, that shouldn't be the first time users are seeing this tool. We want to make sure they're involved in the decision making so they can be your champions rolling it out to the rest of the team. All right, and then lastly, tip number 10, don't repeat mistakes. Really just experience, right? Like this nice gentleman touching the wet paint wall twice. How do we avoid this, right? Don't make the same mistake twice. And learn from others. For those of you not from the United States, we have a holiday here called Thanksgiving. It occurs on a Thursday in November, and usually people get Friday off as well. 10 years ago, when I first started working on Salesforce, I was working from home on a Wednesday afternoon, about to sign off for a couple days. And a request came in to create a new validation rule on the opportunity object. And I thought, oh, this is a pretty simple enough validation. Let me go create a validation rule on the opportunity object directly in production. And I immediately got frantic calls from sales reps. Hey, I'm in somebody's house right now, and I can't save this opportunity record. OK. Rolled it back, built it in the sandbox, saw that I had the logic backward, tested it, and then moved it to production. I will never make that mistake again. I really hope none of you make that mistake either. Learn from others' mistakes, right? One of the things I like about Google is we have a culture of blameless postmortem. And that means when something does go wrong, as things do go wrong, we don't blame people, but we understand why the mistakes happened, right? What allowed the mistake to occur? What allowed it to become worse than it maybe should have been, right? Instead of blaming the person, let's blame the process. How did this happen? Why did it happen? And why was it as bad as it was, right? Instead of us assigning blame to people. All right, and then bonus tip for you, everybody likes pictures, right? So take advantage of diagramming tools. There are a lot on architect.salesforce.com. Rapid prototyping tools, mock-up tools. Some of them include Lucidchart, which has a partnership with Salesforce with some of the icons. We're big fans of Figma over at Google. Avoni is an app exchange app that lets you kind of prototype Lightning Web Components. And honestly, sometimes I just like going in and throwing a quick UI together in a sandbox, or taking a screenshot of another part of my application, because I know it's going to end up looking similar to whatever I'm building, so I'm trying to establish standards where everything looks somewhat similar. But again, no surprises. Make sure the users know what to expect, and they've seen your tool ahead of time before you are launching it to them. All right, so with these tips in mind, I'm going to summarize real quick, and then we're going to architect together a little bit here. So again, Salesforce Well-Architected resources are available, architect.salesforce.com. Again, there's a session tomorrow morning, I want to say at 11:30, on the future of the Well-Architected Framework. So you may see a slightly different framework at Dreamforce, but this is it as it stands currently. But think about making your next solution trusted, easy, and adaptable, right? Hopefully with some of these tips. But also don't forget about soft skills and learning from experience, not making the same mistake again. And of course, diagrams are always welcome. And of course, as I mentioned before, the architect's favorite mantra, there is no one right way. It always depends, and it does. And that's why we're here. That's why we're architects. That's some of the intrigue and the annoyance of the job. But it does depend, and a lot of it depends on the experience and some of the options available. But now the Well-Architected Framework gives you a baseline of here's how Salesforce recommends doing it. Here's some proof. This is why I made the decision that I did. All right, so let's architect together a little bit. Get your architect hats on. And we don't have a mic runner, so I'm going to shout out here and repeat people's responses back. But I'm going to do a couple demos, each for trusted, easy, and adaptable. And the first one is making our application a little more trusted. So we have a data model here for a company called Trusted Trucking. And the Trusted Trucking company provides delivery services for appliances, right? They're currently working with one big box store, which is represented by the account object. And they're expanding to 4 new brands in the next 3 years, right? The accounts all have addresses on them. And each brand can receive 20,000 deliveries per week. So if we extrapolate that out, that's about 1 million delivery records, custom object per year. And they want to use native reporting and list views. Drivers also need to be able to see deliveries for their assigned accounts. So the drivers are the user object. And managers need historical records of complaints, which are captured by the driver history custom object. Managers and drivers also need to report on 365 days worth of data. Can anybody shout out maybe a concern with this current data model here and what they could do to fix it? Does it make sense to have an account object and an address object, for example? I'm hearing some no's. Anything anyone would suggest about account or address? Could have multiple addresses. OK, that's a good point. Do we need a whole separate object for addresses? OK, it depends. Could be a possible option. We could use the standard one. There is a field on account, billing address, shipping address, another possible option. Standard address where? Oh, yeah, there is a standard address object now. That's a good point, too. Keep in mind, we're going to have 1 million records a year. Anybody see any concerns with 1 million records a year on each account record? OK, so storage, data skew potentially. What can we do to mitigate some of that? Sub-accounts, I heard, yes. So maybe we don't, if we're delivering to Target, for example, we're going to be delivering to more than one Target store. So maybe we can have a parent Target account and then a bunch of child account records as well. OK. How about this custom delivery object? Does it make sense to have a custom delivery object in this situation? Is there another object that might work better here? Orders. OK. Standard order object potentially could take the place of the custom delivery object. Makes sense. Cases, potentially as well, sure. Any other concerns? We need 365 days worth of data, and we have 1 million records per account. Any suggestions what we could do there potentially? OK, reports and dashboards instead of individual list views, maybe. Great. So some good solutions there. Again, different scenarios in different situations could be correct. Maybe instead of driver history, we utilize a custom or a standard object there as well, maybe the case object. I'm going to give you a possible solution here for what we could do. So we talked about this a little bit, right? Maybe we get rid of the custom address object. Maybe we keep it. It's possible we do want it. Maybe we utilize the billing address and shipping address on the standard account object. Somebody mentioned sub-accounts, making sure we have child account records as well. We talked about maybe using the order object. Somebody called that out instead of the custom delivery object. And because we're going to have 1 million records per year, maybe we have some sort of archiving strategy because we only need data for the last year, right? I honestly think maybe case would make more sense instead of a driver history custom object. But again, maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't. All right, let's talk about architecting an easy solution here. So we have approved the use of Agentforce and a custom integration with OpenAI. We have a small dev team that has about 6 months worth of work in their backlog. And we have a couple problems we're trying to solve. We're getting about 1 to 2 support cases a week, requiring a custom video clip to be generated. It's about an hour per video. Right, we also have 3 to 5 cases per week that require a hard-to-use custom Apex tool critical to the business. Takes about 10 minutes per case. And then we have every sales rep spending 4 hours a day writing emails to leads. 70% of these leads are uncontacted within 5 days. And so right now we have an AI roadmap we're rolling out. In the order we got the requests, right? We're doing a case video wizard with a tool called Runway ML. Building an Apex wizard using a custom integration with OpenAI. And then we're going to get to our lead emails also with a custom integration with OpenAI. Anybody, any concerns with business priority and return on investment here with our current roadmap? There you go. Lead emails, probably easier to solve, save way more time. And also, they look like a bigger problem. Every sales rep is spending half their day writing them, right? So maybe we want to move that to the front. It's a big business priority. It's a big problem. Any other concerns with our roadmap? Think about our data governance we have in place, right? We've approved Agentforce and a custom integration with OpenAI. Maybe it makes sense to go standard. Maybe it makes sense to go custom. Any concerns with our approach for any of these tools here? Apex tools complexity may be unnecessary. OK. So maybe there's a way to simplify that. Flow or an agent, maybe. Maybe Agentforce even. OK. Where would we put that at? So if we have leads first, where do we want to put our Apex wizard after that? Or solving that problem, at least, with cases? Probably third? OK. And then we have our custom video clips for cases. It takes about an hour per. We get 1 to 2 per week. Maybe second there, maybe third there. Any other concerns with the approach? Why Runway ML? Exactly. That is not on the list of approved tools. So why are we using Runway ML for that? Very good question. So if we want to re-architect this roadmap to make it a little easier, we might flip it around a little bit. Right? We might adjust the priority to align our business value and our business impact, the amount of work to deliver. Somebody mentioned it'll be easier to tackle leads, and the amount of work it takes to maintain. So lead emails maybe should be first. And since they're leads, potentially we can use Agentforce for that. We don't need necessarily a custom integration with OpenAI. Maybe for the Apex wizard, we do simplify it in a way where we don't need a bunch of custom, hard-to-use tools. We can use Agentforce to handle cases instead. And then we need to ask ourselves, we have a 6-month backlog. Do we need to do everything on our roadmap? Do we need to handle custom video clips? Maybe there's a better way to handle that. So is video generation even worth the effort and the cost of maintenance? Right? Can we utilize Agentforce for some sort of case response pilot instead? Right? And again, somebody called out, why are we using Runway ML? That's not on the list of approved tools. So making sure we have that governance in place and we're really using tools that have been approved. All right, and then lastly, our adaptable demo. We have a setup here. We're providing just-in-time access to the service console. Users are going to try to log in from the laptop over a VPN. They're then going to be routed through single sign-on, SSO. That is IP address restricted. They're then going to get to Salesforce, and our just-in-time provisioning is going to check, is this user in Salesforce? If not, create a user record with available Service Cloud licenses. And once that's done, or if they're already in the system, let's route them to Service Cloud. And if there's some sort of error, kick the user out back to the login screen. Right. There are at least 4 issues here where we might want to have an alert if something goes wrong. Anybody, any suggestions on where we want to be alerted in this flow here?
IP locked access.
IP locked access. So if a user gets locked out, yeah, user gets locked out, they can't fix it by themselves potentially. That could be a problem. Any other alerts we might want to show to somebody at least? Alert somebody that something's gone wrong?
User creation.
User creation, OK. What could go wrong with user creation?
In the IP, just creating new users without any approval or something like that.
OK, it's possible. It's creating users without approval. OK, maybe there's a process we need in place there. That's fair. Licenses, I heard. Yeah, if we run out of Salesforce licenses, we run out of Service Cloud licenses, could be a problem. Yeah, SSO issues. If SSO is down, if Salesforce is down, we probably want to be alerted. Any other issues we might want to have an alert? IP address, sure. Somebody mentioned they got locked out, or if they're logging in from somewhere that's not on the VPN, rogue login potentially we want an alert for, right? And so again, some situations where we want to be alerted that something has gone wrong. A user cannot fix the action by themselves, or there is a potential problem where we need to order more licenses. We have a rogue attacker trying to log in from outside the VPN. Red user's locked out. Salesforce is down. SSO is down. Right? These are things we potentially want to be notified about to make sure our system is adaptable to changes, and we're not just stuck hoping somebody reports it, or a lot of people report it. All right, so with that, I do want to thank you for coming today. We have a few minutes for Q&A also. QR code if you would like to get a $10 Starbucks gift card. Definitely, I'd love your feedback on how the session went. Salesforce, I'm sure, would love it as well, so make sure to scan this QR code here. Provide feedback on the session today, and potentially get $10 of coffee on Salesforce. Beyond that, if you enjoyed the talk, I'm giving another one tomorrow on 5 mindset shifts for the AI era at 3 o'clock upstairs at the Trailblazer Theater. And if you enjoyed this talk and think a friend or coworker would benefit from it, I'm presenting it again tomorrow at 3:30, so definitely let people know that as well. And with that, I think we have 5 minutes left for Q&A. If anyone has any questions, wants to come up to the mic here, happy to answer your questions. If not, thank you so much.